Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Charlie Tyler. I'm the pastoral minister here, and it's my privilege to look on the smiling, beautiful faces that are staring back at me this morning. And those of you who are guests and visitors, you should know that you have come into a place where kindness and love is spoken often. Speaking of visitors, if you are a first or second time visitor, I would like it if you'd be comfortable to stand where you are, give us your name and tell us where you're from, and we'll greet you if we can. Yes, sir, if you would please.
Yeah, my name's Larry Herlong, pastor Chris Meyer, and live in Sun City.
Welcome, good to have you here. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jackie Scott. I live in Sun City and in New Hampshire.
Welcome. Are there any others? Thank you all for being here, and those of you that are longtime members and participants, you understand the significance and value of this community that we call the Unitarian Universalist tradition and faith, and that's why we draw ourselves here, even on a beautiful sunshiny day like today, to come out on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. That speaks volumes of what really matters here in this place. So for those of you that are guests, please feel free, and you are welcome here. There's a number of announcements that I want to bring to your attention. One of them, of course, is the Friction Farm performers. You just saw them play a moment ago. They'll be here this coming, help me?
Saturday.
Okay. So I hope that you'll be able to come and make your presence here. $25 for tickets, and it's a donation. We look forward to that. There are other announcements that I want to make. Kathleen Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathleen Kelly, and I'm co-chair of your membership committee. If you're relatively new here, you might not see the work of our committees, so I thought I'd just share with you a little bit today. Our committee had 7 people gathered on Wednesday, and we had a mini retreat. And we talked about our goals, we talked about our hopes for the future, which I brought to share, and I'll post this. So as a committee, one of our big goals is to try to do some more long-range planning, like be able to have a calendar so that you can say, oh, there'll be a dinner on this day, let me mark it down. We've been doing pretty much month to month, and now we're trying to look at 6 months to a year. So stand by, watch for that, and mark your calendars. Coming up, we have a lot of activities. So on the, let me think if I get this right, the December 2nd is going to be our potluck supper, which is our 2nd annual holiday potluck supper. And by holiday, it just means your potluck should be a dinner or a dish that you have traditionally in your family. So if you always have scalloped potatoes, make us scalloped potatoes. It will be a shared meal. It's $10 at the door, and that covers the paper products and the beverages. The sign-up is on the table in the back. And so if you are leaving town for Thanksgiving, it would be good to write your name down now, just so you don't forget. And I want to remind you about the new policy we have, which is that if you sign up for something, we're expecting you to come. And if you don't come, we still are expecting your money. So just keep that in mind, because we have a tiny budget. That next day, we're going to have a new member recognition ceremony here. If you're a new member, you'll be standing up here, and we'll welcome you. It's a ritual, and so it'll be a brief one. Then on the 10th, the following Sunday, we're having committee fair in place of the talkback. And the purpose of a committee fair, it's kind of like when you were in school and you had the clubs, put out their tables and you found out what they did. Our committees will be set up in the lobby, and your job is to go and decide which one of them you'd like to join. Because it is the invisible work that we do in this committees that helps you to become a deeper part of us. So we hope you'll come and sign up for the potluck supper if you're going away. Thank you.
This next announcement that I need to make, I'm probably not going to do this well, and so I need to apologize ahead of time. We have been urged by a couple of our members who are of the Jewish persuasion to join together and find a way that we might be able to gather our hearts together in a way that we can talk about the events that have been unfolding. And so with that urging from some of our members and with the board's consent and permission, this coming Saturday, beginning at 10 o'clock, I'm going to ask, first of all, those of you that have a connection and an interest in the Jewish faith, whether it's your background or commitment, and then those who are also deeply and passionate about what's unfolding in the Middle East, to gather here. And Ann Harrison and I will do our best to try and facilitate some conversations that should be significant and meaningful, I hope. And I do know that in a congregation that leads with kindness and finishes with love, that we'll find a way to have that conversation with each other. So that's by way of an announcement. I'm sure that creates a lot of questions inside of you, and I'm going to go ahead and answer them now. I don't know. But let's get together and support each other. Yes? Good. Thank you. A sad piece of news. Marge Lamke passed away last night. Jim Lamke, of course, and Marge have been an active part of this congregation for a long time. Marge had been declining for a good while. I was able to visit with her family, Jim, and Marge's children yesterday, midday. She passed away maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock last night. I'm not sure, but it was just last night. Obviously too early for there to be plans, so we can't know anything quite yet. But as soon as we know, you'll know. And I think that's all the announcements. Have I forgotten something? Dick Hood, if you would please.
Good morning. I see mostly familiar faces, but I see a few people I don't know, so I will introduce myself. I'm Dick Hood. I'm, among other things, a retired UU minister. a member, a proud member here at UUCL, and once in a while they allow me to occupy the pulpit. And it's so nice to be in the pulpit and not on that screen. I gotta tell you. Really nice. Opening the words this morning are from Ralph Waldo Emerson, famous transcendentalist. You may not know that Ralph Waldo Emerson was also a Unitarian minister. He went to Harvard Divinity School, graduated, and was ordained. And after a short while in the church, he left the church, disillusioned. But he was always sympathetic throughout his life to the causes that the Unitarians of that era were expounding. But he was not a happy camper in the ministry. However, he had some great words, and this sentence is among them. The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have that life make some difference. You need to know that you have made a difference and that you have lived well. Our opening hymn this morning, if you would stand if you are willing and able, is number 121, We'll Build a Lake. Ann Harrison, who normally occupies this spot, is not here this morning. And you have a substitute. Not a worthy substitute, but a substitute nonetheless. I'd like to take this morning to introduce you to a man of our history. His name was Theodore Parker, and he was a contemporary of Ralph Waldo Emerson, a transcendentalist. He went to Harvard Divinity School. A very interesting man. He was a voracious reader as a youngster and only slept 4 or 5 hours a night because all he wanted to do was read. He also was very fluent. He spoke 6 or 7 languages fluently, and before he died, he had another couple of languages that he was trying to learn to be fluent in. Parker started in a small congregation, and it was quickly recognized that he had some oratorical skills that were very much in demand during the era of the early 19th century. And he moved to Boston. Was not far removed. He was born and raised in Lexington, Massachusetts, which is a suburb. And there was a church actually created around Theodore Parker. And they met in a large theater. They didn't have a church building. And throngs came to hear Parker's sermons. And he was also a very noted lecturer. And back then, a lecturer was what Netflix is today. It was almost a form of entertainment. And Parker did the circuit of lecturing. He was both beloved and hated. Hated, that's probably a strong word, but disliked by the other Unitarian ministers of the area. No minister would exchange pulpits with him, which was something that was common back in that era, that you exchanged pulpits as a measure of solidarity and good faith. But they ignored Parker, and they didn't like him because Parker was taking Unitarianism into a new direction. No longer was it going to be simply a Bible-based sort of left-wing Christian movement. It was Parker, perhaps more than anyone else, who strongly said, no, there are other legitimate means of finding religious truth. Intuition, looking at nature, and reason. Those were not things that most Unitarian ministers wanted to hear about. And it was Parker, more than any other person, who brought Unitarianism really out of strictly biblical mode and over to one that we now share together. The idea that there are many sources of religious truth. Parker was also a firebrand and a revolutionary. He was extremely strong for social causes to the point where he was hated, particularly by slavers who had come north after the Dred Scott decision and made a living by capturing freed slaves who lived in the Boston area. And if they could be captured and sent back, they would be sent back to slavery in the South, and a reward would be given by the man who, quote, owned that person. It was so bad that legend has it that Parker, when he was preparing his sermons, actually had a loaded pistol right by his side so that he could defend himself. Parker was a notorious worker, and he had talked about earlier about his reading. He only slept 4 or 5 hours a night. He had a big church. He was a pastor as well, and he was working and reading constantly to the point where it really got to his health, and he developed tuberculosis. Back then, one of the ways in which people treated illness, sounds good today, was to go to Europe, to go sailing. That's not a bad idea when you think about it. In Parker's case, though, it was rather tragic. Parker went on a tour of Europe, and while he was in Rome, he died at the age of 50. He died quite young. His body was taken to Florence, Italy, and he was buried in a cemetery for Americans. And then there, he was forgotten. And his grave evidently was overgrown and practically not visible until about 20 years ago, when a group of people who had a sense of history of our denomination went to Florence and cleaned up his grave and made sure that it would be a source of pilgrimage, perhaps, for some Unitarians to come to visit Theodore Parker's grave. He was the man who was probably the most responsible for why we are here today and what we espouse in our beliefs and our theology. And for that, we should give him thanks, and I'll have a little bit more to say about Theodore Parker later on.
And now in sharing from our abundance, I see that a good many of us have noticed that table in the back where we're depositing our kitchen goods and staples, non-perishable food that we share with 2 food pantries in this area, the Sandalwood Food Bank and also Bluffton Self-Help. It's a very worthy project. And good news is I see that under the table and possibly on the top, there is room for some more. So if anybody just forgot to bring something this week, the good news is you're going to get another opportunity next week, and the next week, and the next week, because this problem just doesn't go away. Thank you. And now in sustaining our spiritual community, we will now, with gratitude, accept your donations as we pass the baskets. Thank you for your generosity.
This is the time we share our joys and concerns. We share our lives with each other in good times and hard times because we are among friends. This is our place of respite. This is home. So if you have something you'd like to share, come forward. Take a stone from the basket. Tell us who you are and what you'd like to share. Please, no announcements and no political statements. And then put your stone in the basket, in the can.
Thank you. I'm Jan Dunn, and I want to share a very trivial note, but it's personally important to us, and just ask everyone's good wishes. You know, we moved here a year ago, and we did not know about UUCL, and we ended up in Pooler, and we don't like it, and especially after we found this church community, and really want to be a lot closer. So we realized driving back and forth every Sunday, why are we doing this? So our house is going on the market this week. We are looking for a rental house, not an apartment, to tide us over until we can hopefully build in Margaritaville, which is our wished for goal down the line. So please keep your thoughts open and share good wishes toward Pooler to get rid of our house quickly. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michelle, and I have both a joy and a sorrow to share. The joy is on Monday, the newest member of our family was born, Brewer Daniel. And mom and baby and dad are all doing fine, and little sister Daisy is thrilled with her new brother. And my sister is thrilled with her fourth grandchild. So the week started off really, really well for us. My sorrow is that my sister-in-law called me the other night from the hospital, and she's been told she'll last till Christmas, but beyond that. And that was much shorter than we had anticipated. And so I would like you all to send her good positive thoughts that she makes it that long. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gary Green. My joy is Sharon and I were here last night for music on Malthus, and it was fantastic. The performer, Rupert Waits, can sing, can play guitar, can josh with the crowd. I talk with him, I feel like I got a new friend. It was wonderful seeing congregation members, not on a Sunday, and just talking and laughing, and it was such a joyous time. I hope next time we'll see more of everyone at Music on Malthus. Thank you, Joanne.
I have a constant joy at this congregation. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I actually picked 7 stones, so that's one of the joys. First off is that you folks allow us to offer you such a wide variety of music. Every week we have John Shepard sharing his talents. Let's hear it for John. A couple of times a month, once or twice a month, we have our little group. We have 7 stones for the 7 principles. We pull out guitars, we do whatever. We have John, we have Kathy Burmeister, we have Joanne Milage, we have Diana Krafsick if she's here. We have Ray Haley, I don't know if he's here. You have me, you have Donna Titus, you have Ellen Titus. Sometimes Marcella Palmer. We have 8, 9, whatever of the 7 principles, we have that. So I just want to let you know that if you are not traveling for Thanksgiving next weekend, a member of our band, of our little band here, of our little group, who is sitting over in the corner right here, he's smiling, pretending that we're not even talking about him. Buddy Kirby is in a working jazz fusion band. I've had the pleasure of seeing his group once, Domino Theory, so next week, Buddy and some members of his band will be here for the Sunday service. So they actually, it's going to be exciting. They actually got together with John, and they're working on a piece with John, and then they're going to do a couple of other pieces. So it's going to be a real treat, so we're really looking forward to that, Buddy.
So some of the members of this congregation know that I have drug you into the Tyler clan. Ray, my cousin, has spoken here 2 or 3 times. I have some sad news from another cousin. My cousin Judith, who is a retired Quaker minister, her son Brian has an inoperable brain tumor. And she's just now beginning to digest that. And so some of you perhaps have heard me use a phrase, I'll be holding you in the light. That's where that came from. That's from my cousin Judith. And so my heart breaks for her and the journey that's ahead for her. And I want to do as much as I can to offer that. So I'm going to take this stone. I'm going to ask y'all, hold Brian in the light. Thank you.
I had a joy just a few minutes ago because I'm lucky enough to be sitting next to Kathy Burmeister, and I heard singing so unlike mine that was really beautiful right next to me. That's my joy. I have a major concern. Some of you, those of you who know me and Jim Lemke, well know that Jim and I have become very, very close friends, even before he had his fall and became a quadriplegic. And his situation now, Jim can barely see. He had something go wrong. If Job is among us, it's Jim. He's been tested. But anyhow, I'm hoping that maybe we can show him some love because he's a lovable guy. He was the main maintenance guy here before he had his fall and just couldn't do it. Even being a quadriplegic, he wanted to come over. He took care of the lights or something. I never fully understood his role, but anyhow, your thoughts, prayers, and possibly, I know Marge would have loved cards. I was going to get up here and say that she'd send them. I was ill at one time, sent me beautiful. She sort of do the artwork, and it was really good. So anyhow, that is my concern.
Now will you join me in reading affirmation number 683 in the back of the hymnal? Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith, divine living.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you heard of Theodore Parker before this morning? Really? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wonderful. I'm actually surprised it's that many. But still, it only represents maybe, I'll be generous, 10% of our congregation here this morning. I have some good news and some bad news. And I thought I'd get the bad news out of the way first. The bad news is I am not immortal. The worst bad news is neither are you. And I believe that there is a little shred in each and every one of us that says, maybe really I am going to be immortal. That we fool ourselves just a little bit into thinking that if I really lead a good life and I have public service and I serve my church and I do all the right things, that somehow my grandchildren and therefore my great-grandchildren and on, they're going to remember me and they're going to remember who I am. That maybe if we lead a life that's a good life, that somehow we're going to be remembered, and that is immortality. Think about it though. Think about your great-grandparents. Think about naming all 8 of your great-grandparents. I won't challenge you, but I will bet you that there are not many folks in this congregation, and I am among them, when I wrote this out, thinking, well, how many can I remember? And the answer for me is 2. And the only reason that it's not 1 is that I know that my great-grandfather was Richard, because throughout our family generation, the firstborn son was always named Richard. And there are those who have never forgiven Molly and I, who named our firstborn son David. The other one I remember, interestingly enough, because I actually did some work on our genealogy, and I found out I have a great-grandfather named Hiram. And the interesting thing, I know nothing about Hiram, but the interesting thing is he's in an unmarked grave in Newton Cemetery outside of Boston. As far as my great-grandfather Richard, no. Don't know anything about him at all, other than his name was Richard. I vaguely remember his son. I was 6 when my grandfather died. We have a finite lifespan of memory that we give to others. It is not infinite unless you're Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, or Jesus Christ. Those 3 will live forever, or so I hope. But the rest of us are doomed to be forgotten. Doomed that our name will fade away, and our good life will fade away, and those that we love will fade away. Think of Theodore Parker. 10% of our congregation, which I was very stunned by. I was expecting only maybe 2 or 3 hands, even remember his name. And yet he probably was the single most influential person who shaped who we are today as a religious movement. 90% of you don't even know his name. How tragic when you think about it. And if I think that if you don't remember Theodore Parker, the chances that as people who come and sit here 50 or 60 years from now, nobody's going to know Dick Hood either. And that's the downer part. of the sermon, except for one little story. I always try to give a story. I served a small Universalist church, very part-time, midway between Rochester and Buffalo, New York. And it was in a very conservative, rural town, whose major industry was apples, up until Governor Rockefeller built a prison in this little town. And then the major economic factor was people worked at the prison. And here in the midst is this small Universalist church in this big, huge building. I'll describe in some other sermon how they got a big, huge building. But it's a small group of people that evidently had, in the past, a much larger congregation. And I remember the first Sunday that I came to preach, and I was only hired for one Sunday, stayed 35 years. Boy, they couldn't get rid of me. No way. I walked in, and the first thing that you saw in the parish hall was this big piece of wood, very nicely finished, with names on solid brass plaques attached to the wood. And there were probably maybe 25 names. And I asked, maybe on the second or third Sunday, who are those names? What do they mean? I had a hunch, but I thought I'd ask them. They were the benefactors of that church, which was established in 1894. And the last person that they could remember that got their name on the plaque was probably in the late 40s. When I was there, we attached one name to the plaque. It is still a small congregation. And when I stop and think about it, there are only 2 people left in that congregation who know anybody on that plaque. And the age of those 2 people, she, the young woman, not so young anymore, I think she's young, is in her 60s, and the gentleman is in his 70s. And when they die, which is going to happen sometime pretty soon, nobody is going to know anything about any one of those names that are on that plaque. Immortality is pretty rare. That's the bad news. I'll take a drink while you meditate on that. There is some good news. Even though we define immortality by our name and our life details, if we define immortality in a different way, then immortality does exist. Look at Theodore Parker. Name recognition, well, pretty good in this room. I wouldn't want to go to Burger King and ask the first 100 people who got a burger to find out how many people knew about Theodore Parker. But his name recognition is still pretty small. And yet, what he did and what he stood for are very much alive. And they're alive right here in this congregation, as they are in congregations throughout the world, mainly in North America, but not totally. Because Theodore Parker stood for reason in religion, for individual freedom of religion, not tied to some text. He stood for rights for gays and lesbians, although we didn't talk about it in those terms. They didn't talk about it in those terms back then. But the same kind of thing he talked about women's suffrage. the right for women to vote at a time when nobody else was talking about that. That wasn't even forbidden. It was kind of ignorant. Nobody cared about that. He talked about child labor in the mills, still an issue today. He talked about world peace, still an issue today. What he did was take our religion from point A to point B, and along with it, a healthy dose of social responsibility. And that's who we are today. And my prediction is that if we play our cards right, that's going to be immortality for Theodore Parker. That those things that he stood for as a transcendentalist and as a responsible person, those things live on. Even though the name, well, maybe not so much. And what about that plaque in that was a little big building, Universalist Church in little rural Albion? Those names very quickly are going to fade totally into oblivion. How tragic, how tragic. And yet that little church with that little band of religious liberals, first of all, provides a place of comfort for the few religious liberals that there are in that area, and there's not many. Trump won Orleans County by a very large margin, which gives you some idea. But that little church still stands for reason. It stands for rights for the LGBTQ community. It hosted a same-sex marriage, maybe two. I'm sure it's the only church in a 20-mile radius where that has occurred. And it also reminds the rest of the population about the separation of church and state. And when the county fathers decided to decorate the county office building, which is right across the street from the church in this little town, and they went and they put up crosses in all the windows of the cupola, and our church got them down. That church reminded those people that we have boundaries that separate church from state. And although they are blurring today, they're still with us. The idea of that rigid separation. And so those people too are immortal. Not that their names are going to be remembered, because they're not. But what the church stood for back then, the Universalist idea, this was a Universalist church, of God is love, that we have individual responsibility for our human beings, that we have the right to believe as we responsibly wish. Those values remain. And they remain because those people provided an endowment to that church that keeps it alive. Those people provided the funds that paid my paltry salary for 35 years. I didn't make a lot of money out there, but it was good. If for nothing else, it was good for my ego. So, they live on, and they are immortal. Now, I know that sounds very dramatic, but the idea of having a legacy, the idea of doing something in our life that will carry on what our beliefs are and what our values are, that's what's really important. And there's a group of people in this congregation who've been working to create what they call chalice lighters. And that is a legacy giving program. Nobody's asking for money here today. Nope. There will be no second collection, as there sometimes is in some churches. That's not the case. What they are asking you individually is, first of all, to stay for 10 minutes and listen to them, and I have sworn them to 10 minutes and no more, but to hear how you can go about taking what you stand for in this church and giving it a life beyond your own life. And that's a pretty important thing when you think about it. So the good news is you are immortal in some ways, or you can choose to be immortal by remembering this church in your estate plans. That's a ticket, and you don't get too many tickets in your life, but in my judgment, that's your and my ticket to immortality. And whether you punch that ticket is up to you. John.
John, and thank you, Dick, too. I appreciate that heartwarming introduction to that message that just about depressed everybody in the house. But at the same time, it's a realism that lets us look forward, and I appreciate the way that you also draw us to a place where we can do those things that will and can make us immortal. I hope that all of you will be able to stay and listen to what the plans are and how to go about this process, and so I'm looking forward to that. And I thank you for being here today, and would ask that as you go forward, that you be able to take the love and kindness of Theodore Parker into your hearts and into your mouths. Thank you. Dick, if you would, please.
The closing words come from a very unlikely source, Warren Buffett. If you don't know Warren, he's one of the richest men in the world and made his money in the stock market. But he wrote this sentence: someone is sitting in the shade today because someone else planted a tree a long time ago.
To extinguish the chalice.
Can we stand together, please? Thank you.
The words are in the order of service. While we extinguish this flame, we still carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment until we are together again.
You may be seated or not.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Friedman. A lot of people know me, a lot of people don't who are new. I've been around for quite some time. I'm going to be up here, guys, because I can't read otherwise. So, and if you want to join me up here, that would be fine too. You'll see that the members of the Finance Committee are handing out the pamphlet for our legacy campaign. And we wanted you to have a copy as we briefly address this campaign this morning. And you'll probably ask, as you look at the size of the pamphlet, you may ask yourself, how did this happen? Why is it so large? Well, you should know that we are not paying for that, because that was one of the printer's mistakes. So we have 200 extras of those, so we thought it would be appropriate to hand them out today, so you can see that. But speaking of the brochure and the packet of information about the Planned Giving program, as you go out in a few minutes for refreshments, and then you can get your own packet by the front door where we greet everyone. We have them all alphabetized, so you can quickly go to that table and pick up your own packet and take it home with you, and you'll have it to read and respond to if you choose to. We've been working as a committee since August 1st of this year. Not to say that there haven't been other times where other individuals in our congregation have worked on the idea of a planned giving program. But for whatever reason, this is the right time, and the committee was there at the right time, and the right people were there to get it done. We put it out in the world that we would announce it today, and it made us do it. And I'm happy to say that it is a start, it is a beginning, and it's something that we want to be part of the culture of our Unitarian Universalist congregation, because ultimately it'll give us the resources to do those things that we would want to do besides what we do with our pledge drive every year. And believe it or not, and I've been treasurer for 4 years and finance chair for 6, there are times where we don't have the funds sitting there ready to go for things that we really need to do. So that's why we designed this program. What we did during those meetings was to, besides meeting, we learned about the topic because none of us are experts on this. We consulted with UUA stewardship development professionals to help guide us, and we attended online seminars. Bottom line, and this is very important, we tried to make something complex or confusing to many people. I know my head spins when I start thinking about all this. As we tried to make it as clear and concise as possible. And theoretically, anyone can give a planned gift. It doesn't have to be a huge gift. Many times, most of the gifts are given at the end of life, but there are also other living gifts that can be arranged. But remember, they're not for the operating budget, they're for other purposes. It can be designated or undesignated. Most of them are generally undesignated, and it would be up to the board as to what the needs were at that very moment. Others will choose that they want to designate a certain purpose for their funds that they give to the congregation. We spent some time, believe it or not, trying to name the committee, the effort. And we ended up with chalice lighters preserving the spirit of life. And it's so funny that it was only last week that I realized that the song that we leave the sanctuary with every morning is the very song, The Spirit of Life. And I think that encapsulates what we're all about. We are a community now, but we are a community going forward with our values, and that is so important. It is to me, and I know it is to a lot of you. So you will find in the packet, you'll find a smaller version of that brochure, which, by the way, we did not pay for because everything was so screwed up with our printers. They said, we're going to give you everything for free. So that, you know, being a finance person, that's always very good. So you will also see in there a form entitled Confidential Bequest Reply Form. And that is truly confidential form. If you choose to let us know at this point in time, and you'll understand why we'd like it done in this point in time in a few minutes, because we do have a challenge match. We'd like to know if you do have UUCL in your will or have named us as a beneficiary of your life insurance or your IRA, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what is in the packet, and of course there is an envelope there that you can send back to us or bring it into our church and put it in the basket. So I think I'm close to my time. We're trying to be very timely here and concise. And I'd like to introduce the next speaker, and the next speaker will be Frank Flamenhoff, who is a member of our committee and a long-term member of this congregation. And he has, along with his wife, Alyssa, set up a matching challenge match, a challenge match for our congregation. And I will let him speak to that. The rules of it are listed carefully in the brochure, but Frank will tell you about his reasoning, why he is doing this now. And Frank, you have to know how important it is to us as a congregation to have this challenge at this moment in time. Thank you.
Hi. As you heard, I'm Frank, my wife's Alyssa. I'm probably, Marvin Koretsky says he's been around as long as me, but I really don't remember that. But I've been, of the names out in that hallway, of the members when we opened this place, built this place, I probably knew all of them. I may not have known all the names, but I knew them much better than I know our current congregation. And I knew many who went before then. I joined the Unitarian Fellowship of Hilton Head in the late 1980s. Dorothy Fine, a longtime member who passed away last summer and was a great lady, was a good friend of mine. And Alyssa was working in Connecticut. She was a librarian who'd worked in the library. She had her MLS, but she hadn't worked as a full librarian. And so she really enjoyed her work. And they would not give her off. I had the winter off, but she had to work. So I was home, and Dorothy said, you know, I've got a place that you might be interested in. And so I not only joined the congregation, we got so hooked that we joined the Unitarian Universalist congregation in New Haven, Connecticut, where we lived and worked at the time. I mentioned Dorothy because I know she planned on giving a sizable amount of donation to this congregation, but never did. I won't go into the particulars. I'm not that fond with her kids and heirs who left her by herself for a couple of years here, where I'd visit her all the time. But we had a special relationship. But the point I'm trying to make is she would have gladly donated. She intended, she told me many times. And she was a self-made woman. She had made all of the money that they had herself. But it never happened. By the time she was dying, she hadn't done anything formal. Money that she thought was going to be in a legacy gift went to pay her pledge the last year. And I'm sure she was planning to give a lot more. But you know what? She was never asked to donate. I've never been asked to donate. Alyssa and I are not wealthy, but our kids are very wealthy. One of our sons is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Another one worked for him and owned 5% of the business. He, when our sound system wasn't working a number of years ago, we were paying someone to come in here for music at Malthus and run sound. Well, I mentioned to one of my sons, this is the one who owned only 5% of the business, that I was thinking of donating something for the sound system. He said, whatever you give, I'll match it. And we got our name on a plaque, which isn't important, but we got a sound system that's still working. So our kids encouraged us to give. Alyssa, I came up with the idea of offering a matching pledge to a total that we would put up of up to $25,000. Actually, the first brochure said we'd match any gift from $1,000 to $25,000. And I got to thinking, no, the total that we would put up would be up to $25,000. But hopefully there'll be more. I was talking also, we had to decide the minimum we would match. And my wife keeps telling me, go. Anyhow, so I was talking to a longtime member who is not very affluent. I've known them. They're great people. They've done a lot for this congregation, but they're not very wealthy. And she said, by the way, Dick said, everybody should be matched. And I'm thinking, if someone gives $100, we're going to match that. It'd be too much paperwork as far as the matching. So she said, we could come up with $1,000. And so I decided that the minimum that we would match would be a pledge of $1,000. Now, if you can only pledge something far less than that, do it. It'll help. But I'm just saying that we will match every pledge up to a total of pledges. And I hope there are a lot more than 25,000. But I thought that if people matched, that'd be a minimum of $50,000 that we would have as a foundation. Think of the fact we've got to raise $15,000 now to, I don't know, I guess we call it the entryway or whatever it is that we're going to be doing. But we would have funds for something like that. We would have funds for new air conditioners. And by the way, having been on the finance committee, I think even before Patricia, who has done a fantastic job in the 6 years she's been the head of it, we've had to worry about such expenses like replacing air conditioning. We've working on $100. How do we get an extra $100? How do we pay for it? The one caveat I have is that we'll only match actual pledges. We're not, a lot of people say we've got a matching thing, and they give what they say they're willing to match. And sometimes people don't come up with that amount. Well, I want you to be involved. If we're going on the hook for that, which we can afford to do, not because we have a lot, but because our kids need nothing from us.
Frank,
we're up?
Yeah, we're up.
Okay. All right. So I just want to make it clear that the $25,000 we are pledging will only happen if others make pledges not of that much each, but just the total that much.
Rest assured that that is clearly defined in the packet.
I'll be very brief. First, I would like to comment on this team. Personally, it's been a huge pleasure working with this group. Each member of this team contributed his unique insights. Dick, with his uncanny ability to not only identify trouble spots, but offer solutions. Frank, continually keeping us honest and grounded in reality, and Patricia's dogged determination to keep this program from becoming another false start. Honestly, when I first agreed to work on this committee, I had not given any thought about a legacy. And last night at Music on Malfris, the Rupert Waite song Justified gave me insight into the meaning of legacy. This may not be what he intended when he wrote the song, but for me, it meant that when I lay down, I want to know, was my life and the choices I made relevant, meaningful, justified? I asked myself, what makes this congregation meaningful and justified? I invite you to ask yourself the same question. It might be the inspirational, thought-provoking speakers each Sunday. It might be getting a card from the care committee when you're sick or troubled. Or maybe it's sharing your joys and concerns, knowing that someone is thinking of you and cares. It might be Charlie, our resident guardian angel, always Johnny on the spot, offering comfort or whatever is needed. It could be any of the many other benefits this community offers. Sometimes it seems too good to be true. I think of our journey at UU as a continuum of people and ideas that's ongoing and continuously evolving. And with this thought in mind, I think we owe a debt to all the forward-thinking members that have gone before, paving the way for UU's now. And as a consequence, I'm beginning to think we owe a debt to all the members that are yet to come. Now it's your turn. Please join us by taking a look at the Chalice Keepers Preserving the Spirit of Life brochures. All opinions, suggestions, and questions are welcome, but only after we have our coffee break. And thank you for listening.
much for your patience, and the talkback, for those who are willing and able, will answer any questions that we can that you may have. But thank you so much.